Paranormal Roundtable. I'm your host, Josh Turner, and with me today is Anthony, Tony. I know you were trying to.
I was yawning. I was hoping you would take it a little longer, so I had time.
I knew you were.
You caught me in the yawn.
He's a bit low energy today.
Today, he's not as.
Worked a double, so I'm tired.
Oh my gosh.
Air quotes, worked a double.
As in, I had a double shot of coffee.
You worked an extra 4 hours. Whoopie do. And then we have Kiam. You want to say hi, Kiam?
Hello.
So Kiam was up here to do some tech stuff, and we were actually recording. And so since he interrupted us, we said, "Come on in and be a co-host."
And we forced up.
I see you're growing out the stash there. What's going on with that?
I broke my trimmer, but
it looks good though.
Thank you.
You're going for the Ace of Spades look.
I think it's more dapper than the. I think Tony shaved, and now you got like the beard going on. I think it looks good, man. Keep it going. So here's what we got tonight. We're going to talk about some Dogman, but first we got to tell you, join the Paranormal Roundtable group on Facebook. We have that going on, and Paranormal Soundtable. Go join Paranormal Soundtable on YouTube. That's where we put all of our delicious music on there. That's written by Nellie, my wife. And so if you would, just go check those out, man. And then, of course, if you're listening to us on Spotify, and that's all you're doing is listening to us on that, or what are the other ones we're on? We're like 16 different ones.
Apple Music, iTunes,
Stitcher,
iHeartRadio, Stitcher, whatever.
There's a bunch of them. Go and listen or watch us on YouTube, because you're missing out, because YouTube is where most of our work is. And it's where all the live streams are, which we do Friday, Saturday, Sunday. This is the Tuesday episode. And we have a Patreon. We have a $10, $20, $30, $40, $50 tier. If you go to the $40, $50 tiers, you can get my books, get them autographed, and you will get other people's books. And, of course, each tier gives you a better swag bag. That we call it swag bag. And then, of course, we have what else we got going on? Oh, we're on Rumble on Thursday night starting this coming week. We're going to be on Rumble. That's going to be at 7 o'clock. We're going to do an hour long on Rumble. Go check out Sunday's episode where we interviewed a woman named Frances, and she told us some amazing stories. So we're going to get into at least one of the stories that we were going to tell on that 3-hour episode. We ended up doing the full 3 hours with her because she had a lot to tell, and we still didn't finish everything. We still have work to do. So that being said, let's get started. We got a lot to talk about. So when she was talking on the show on Sunday, and that's why you got to listen to the YouTube channel if you to know what's going on. We started getting into some of the weird things that happen when people have these encounters with Dogman. One of the things that we discussed was how they cause people to have what feels like they're I call it satori. It's like a heightened sense of things.
Yeah.
Things slow down. Sometimes people report having like they'll get like this weird lightheadedness, or their head will feel like there's a lot of pressure. They can't see straight, or they can't hear things. Like everything will go like deaf. It'll be deafening, or there'll be animals, in the area, and they'll just go quiet.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of weird stuff, a lot of weird anomalies with these encounters people have with Dogman. And of course, Dogman, if you're new to this, that's like a werewolf type creature, walks around on its hind legs, and I've done a lot of research on it. And there's that, and then there's this other thing that people see, which resembles a bear. And that has been something predominantly here in Central Texas, but we've gotten some reports in some other parts of Texas too. East Texas in particular, and of course, West Texas, we get a lot of reports of these weird hyena-looking creatures. The Southwest seems to be full of those. And I don't know what to make of all of it. I know that the Bigfoot, different types of Bigfoot creatures, and then you get these pale crawlers. But when you have these, I don't even call them cryptids, they're some sort of, non-human creatures. When you get into these sightings, it just seems like more often than not, they're accompanied with some sort of weird, like, phenomena, like weird, there's some sort of weird anomalous something that goes on. So that being said, this first encounter, I believe it's a dog man, and I'm going to tell you why. Because even though nobody saw it directly, I know I just know that that's what this is. Now, let me get into this encounter. We'll see how long it takes, how much time we have after I'm done telling this one. Well, this guy, we'll call him Patrick. It's not his real name, but it's close enough. And he had an encounter with something, and this is weird. It's kind of like a haunting, but like I said, I think it was a dogman type entity, and I say entity, you got to hear the story. This happened like north of the Dixie National Forest, which is in Utah. Now, there is a weird area up there that everybody knows about, and it's Skinwalker Ranch, and it's got a show about it, and it's, Thomas Winterton, actually, I had the chance to interview him. He's one of the people on the show, and he was on Blondes and Booze, which comes on Thursdays. Go check them out. And I used to co-host with them, but I don't have the time to do it now. But we talked about all the weird anomalous things that go on at Skinwalker Ranch, and everybody's pretty much familiar with it. If you're listening to the show, you probably know. But this wasn't that. This was somewhere else. This was like, and he used to go up to Bryan Head, actually, is a place I used to like to go to. And now I've known this guy for a while, and he's half Ute. His mother was Ute, his dad is Caucasian. And so his dad, though, grew up really close to the reservation, which is how he met his mother, and, they hit it off and whatever. And so they started vacationing up there in Bryan Head, and then his dad's friend introduced him to a vacation spot just I guess it would be north of the Dixie National Forest right there in Utah. And he told him, he says, I have a cabin up there, and if you'd like to go and use it, you can. And then he says, I rent it out to people. When Patrick's dad passed away, he stayed friends with that guy's son. But that guy's son wanted to rent it out. That was his thing. It was like a form of income for him. And so he let him use it a couple times, and then he started charging him for it. And he said, look, this is how I make my money, whatever. And he goes, but if you're really interested in this cabin, we could work out a deal. Maybe you could do something. And since he knew the guy and his family, he said he would do like a rent-to-own thing. So then he talked to his fiance at the time, and he told her, he said, look, this cabin is up for to buy, and I've been going there since I was a kid, since he was younger. And he said that I've had nothing but pleasant experiences there. I'd like to go, I'd like to go in on it and invest, with somebody. So she talked to her dad, and they came up with the money to put down and then start working toward buying it. Now, he said that the first 2 times he went up there with his fiance, it was wonderful. It was like a dream. It was like he was with the woman he loved, and everything was great. He's like, dude, it was like magical. We go down to the lake. It was just like there was nothing wrong. Like everything was perfect. 2 days. And then the next time he went up there, they went there for 3 days, a long weekend. He said it was like Memorial Weekend, but it's secluded enough to where they didn't have a lot of people around. But then something happened. The third time they went up there, they both had really, really bad dreams, and it started raining and thundering and lightning every time they went outside to go do anything. He said, and it was weird. It was like the rain was almost like it was just hovering around them. He's like, I could see that it wasn't raining other places, but wherever we were at, it was like it was raining. And it was like it was following them like a dark cloud. And so then he goes, we stayed indoors and we played games and we just tried to have fun, but it wasn't fun. Without the outdoor activities, it just wasn't a lot of fun. And he's like, and it never failed. We go outside and it would start raining again. And so he goes, it was like we were cursed. And so, he had a couple bad experiences there. The next time he went back, there was no rain, but there was like they had almost had a boating accident. His girlfriend fell out of the boat, and she wasn't wearing a life jacket. She's not a strong swimmer. She panicked. He got her out, but she nearly drowned. And so in both times, he told me he was having these really bad dreams. Now, the interesting thing about Patrick is his mother passed away when he was young, and his dad always believed that it had something to do with her dad. Her dad did something. Her dad was practicing things like, I just got to say it. It was like black magic. He was into black magic. And now whenever, these weird anomalies started happening, I asked him, I said, "What do you think that, you never really knew your grandfather very well. He went to jail for doing something to somebody and he got out and then he went back to jail and he all of a sudden ended up getting all this money. He bought some land. He ended up like doing all this stuff and he had all this prosperity. And it was like his life just turned around right after his mother died." So Patrick's mother dies, and then all of a sudden his grandfather does really well and ends up running into a bunch of money and making a good business deal and having this, everything was going well for him. Patrick's dad always believed that this dude did something, like used her as like a sacrifice to do something to gain that wealth. He really believed that. And so eventually he gets in trouble for swindling somebody on some land deal and he goes to jail for a while. Like he screwed some people out of some major money and they got together and they sued him and then they brought criminal charges because, what he did, it was like a large amount of money and it was fraud. So he ended up, being incarcerated for an extended period of time. And he was also, I guess, the prime suspect in a homicide that had taken place in Arizona. And so he never got charged with that, but Patrick's dad believed that he was involved in that too. So when he ended up going to prison, he's like, and I never met the guy after I was like 7 years old. I never met him. I never had anything to do with him. He's like, I just knew my dad hated him. He goes, and my aunt, my mom's sister, always believed that he had something to do with my mother's death. Now, his aunt, she was around. She stayed, they were very close. And she kind of became like his surrogate mother. His mother died when he was 14, going on 15. And he said that his aunt was basically like the one that took him in and was like his mother. And she was always there, the younger sister, And his uncle, which would have been his mother's older brother, the oldest, he believed the same thing. And he was very close with his dad. And they knew each other. They went to school together. That's how they knew each other. They were very close. And he said, he's the one that introduced him to his sister. Same situation with my Uncle Jaime. If I wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for him, because he introduced my dad and my mom. So me and Patrick have talked about that before. Just we have some similarities there. But one of the things that happened to him when he was at the cabin, his girlfriend said that one night when she was asleep, he was asleep, she got up to go downstairs and she couldn't sleep. And so she tried to do the traditional, let me make some warm milk type thing, whatever. And she's half native, right? She goes downstairs and he said that she saw something in the window that looked like a shadow. But this is as close as anybody got to seeing anything that looked like a werewolf or a dog man, because it had pointy ears that stood straight up on either side of its head that looked wolf-like. And so she thought that she saw this and she looked again and it was gone. And there was just like a shadow there and it was gone. And so the next morning she tells Patrick, she says, I saw something in the window, something standing on the deck on the front porch. And it looked like it had like a wolf's head. Well, Patrick, at that point, he told her, when I was a kid and I was out here, I thought I saw something in the woods that looked wolf-like or, whatever. But it was on all fours, but he goes, it looked like it was hopping around like a man. And it was doing it like this weird circular dance thing or whatever, but on all fours. But it was moving kind of like a man would on all fours, and it was by the lake. He goes, and me and my little brother were freaked out. We thought, what the heck is that? And so he's like, my little brother threw a rock at it. And he's like, and then it turned and looked at us, and he goes, and I could have swore it looked like a man wearing like a skin, but his arms and legs were elongated. And he's like, and then next thing you know, I wake up and it's morning, and I thought it was a dream. But then years later, when we were in our teens, my brother, he goes, was talking about it to my cousins at a party. We were at a little get together, a birthday party, and he said that he started telling the incident. And he was like, "Wait a minute, that really happened?" Because he thought that, and that's a lot of times that's how it happens. And we've heard this before. Like somebody will have like a dream or something, and they think it's a dream, but then later on somebody will say, "Yeah, you remember when this happened?" And they're like, "Wait a minute, that really happened?" And so, this is something that's like a recurring theme. And I thought that was interesting. But he couldn't tell me much detail about it. He said it was kind of hazy. He just remembers it was like brown. And the person that was, or if it was a person, he saw like a skin tone that looked kind of like a light brown color. But he couldn't tell anything else about it. He couldn't tell me what it really looked like. He's like, I can't remember. He goes, my brother knows more details about it. Now, I have not gotten a chance to talk to his brother. I tried and get through to him, and he works all the time. He's a traveling person. He travels for his job. So it's hard to pin him down. And he messaged me back at one point and was like, I'll call you back, and I never got another call. But so anyway, I just had to move on. But he's just like, take my word for it. My brother, he gave me a lot more detail. And he told me that what his brother saw, this is interesting, the creature, as he called it. He didn't say it looked like a man. He said it looked like a creature. And it had a weird sloped, elongated head. And it had like a ridge on its back, almost like a hyena. And it had lower back limbs, but the lower back limbs looked like how a man's legs would look if they were bent.
Like bent backwards?
Yeah, but it was like a man's legs bent backwards, but then the front legs looked like arms. That's a dogman type creature, yeah. And he said that its eyes were green. So that was another thing that I thought was interesting. But Patrick himself doesn't remember this, and this is his little brother who has a better memory of it. And then he said that was it. That they didn't have anything else happen. And he said when he threw the rock at it, it stopped jumping around and then like started running toward them. And next thing you know, he's waking up and it's morning. And so he doesn't know like how he doesn't remember the rest of the story or what happened. But his brother, the same thing. His brother doesn't remember anything once it started coming toward them. So you fast forward to the incidents that started taking place. His cousin, who's full-blooded Ute, started to go to the cabin, and that first time he took him out there was his cousin and his wife, and they all were hanging out and having a little get-together there, and it was like the July 4th or whatever, and they were hanging out and popping fireworks and doing whatever. It's a very secluded place. It's out in the middle of nowhere. And he said that when they were doing this, they heard this weird growling sound coming from the bushes. And his cousin's wife and at that time now they were married, his wife was his fiance. They walked over there to the brush and they saw something kind of move in between two dead logs and a tree and then take off. But it was kind of like really low to the ground. And the way it crawled was like there was 4 limbs and a tail, but it was flattened out and it crawled. They didn't look at the head. They didn't get a good look at the head. They didn't know what it was. And they ran back screaming and yelling and in panic. And of course, they kind of laughed it off. And his cousin was like, oh, y'all are just scared, whatever. And his cousin made a joke. He says, oh, it's probably a Navajo Skinwalker up here to, come at us, whatever, like made a joke, which they're not really supposed to do that, So he made the joke that he goes, oh, it must be the Navajo curse on us. It's it's coming after us. And then his girlfriend, who, even though she's white, she was like, don't say that. You know, you're not supposed to talk like that. And he's like, what do you know? You're not Ute, you're not Navajo. And she's like, I know enough that you're not supposed to say that. And she said, when they did, this is what he said, Patrick, he said they were on the porch and they hear whistling. And then it went on and on all night long. And then at one point they heard a banging on the back door and they, went and checked and there was nothing there. And so I had to ask, this is in the late 90s, by the way. And so then I had to ask, I said, were you armed? And he said, well, yeah, we were armed. I had a rifle and a gun. He goes, I'm pretty sure whatever was out there was not going to be affected by bullets. And he goes, I'm just going to tell you like that. And so at this point, I asked him point blank, and I've known this guy for like 20-something years. And he'd never told me this until he started listening to the show. And then he says, look, I had something happen. But it, like I said, they never saw, but until, get this. So he says, look, I have a reason to believe that this thing was some sort of spiritual entity. And I said, well, what do you think it was? He goes, well, I think that it was some sort of demonic being that could change its shape. He says, because at one point, he goes, we were outside and we saw a rabbit and we were all four out there. And he's like, and we were like, oh, look, a rabbit. And then all of a sudden, an eagle comes just flying down, not a bald eagle, but just a regular eagle, came flying down from a tree, from atop a tree, and just grabbed it right in front of us. And then it didn't even eat it. It just dropped it and let it go through the trees. So it was like a horrific thing. He's like, and then the girls were completely stunned. And he goes, and we were all having these weird nightmares. He's like, to the point where we went out to go canoeing. And he goes, and it was like a 3-mile hike. So we decided to go hike down to the lake. And then that's when we decided, hey, you know what? Let's go back to the place and canoe. And he's like, Cassie, that's his cousin's girlfriend. She was like, I'm really tired. She just became overwhelmed with this sleepiness. And he said, when we got back to go get the canoe and head that way to the lake, he's like, she got really tired. And she was like, I'm going to stay here. I don't feel like going. And he's like, oh, how convenient. Now we all have to carry this canoe by ourselves. It's like 2 miles or something like that. But he said it wasn't that heavy. And it was just, he goes, it's a nice walk, whatever. And so we kind of made a joke about it. We're like, oh, okay, now you're going to make us carry the boat by ourselves, whatever. And so she's like, yeah, I'm going to stay by myself. And there was a lot of weird stuff happened that trip. So he told her, he said, look, my gun is right here. This, blah, blah, blah. So she says, this is what she says. She goes in there and she goes to sleep. She's like, she gets waken up about an hour into her nap and she can't move. So she's having like sleep paralysis. So Cassidy's like trapped. She cannot move. And she said that her face was turned to the side. She said she was sleeping on her stomach. But then she said she tried to move her head, forward and push herself up. She could not push herself up, and her head was shoved down into the pillow to where like all she did was just turn her head, and then she was stuck down into the pillow. And there was some sort of force pushing down on her. And it wasn't in a sexual way. She said it wasn't anything like that. But she could feel like this fur or hair or something. Like a coarse, like hair, almost like fur. She said, pushing down on her. And she said she was head down in the pillow, face down in the pillow, and she couldn't breathe. And she said, I began to panic. She goes, and then I felt this like breath on my neck. And she goes, and something poked the back of my head. And she goes, it felt like a dog's snout. And she said that there was like this dog-like snout on the back of my head. She's like, I felt the breathing. She's like, and then I heard this thing talking in another language that she didn't know, but she could tell that it was some sort of native language because she had heard her boyfriend and his friends speak this language, and she said it sounded very similar to that. So she said that when this thing was pushing down on her, she's like, I can't breathe. I feel like I'm about to go unconscious. She's like, this thing is killing me. So she couldn't breathe, and she's like, I'm about to go unconscious. And then she said that this, whatever it was like an entity. She said that it was very powerfully muscular, upper body. She could feel it. And it was like just laying down on top of her, and it was like breathing down her neck. And at one point she felt like it didn't bite her, but it put its mouth around her neck sideways, and she felt teeth, like how when a dog kind of, chews, she's like my puppy would do that, like chew at you.
So do you think it was a way which it was physically there, or like possessing her in like a way where she felt those things?
Well, that's the thing. She wasn't being possessed. She just felt like an entity was on her.
Okay.
And she's also a very devout Christian. And she said that at that point she started to she couldn't speak. So she began to think, Jesus, 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 help me. Please, Jesus, help me. And she thought this over and over again, like a mantra in her head. And eventually this thing let go of her.
Like when you say bullets wouldn't hold it down, is it because it's not but did it physically not strong enough to hold something like that down? Or would it be you just can't, it's too spiritual for you to shoot it?
I don't know, because this was what was told to me. Patrick said that he didn't think that what this was, and I think it's because of this incident and another one. That I'm about to talk about. So eventually, this thing let go, and she could feel it release her, and then she lifted her head up and was like, "I could breathe." And she goes, and I was gasping for air. This thing had so much pressure down on me, and she said that she could see the indentation of herself on the mattress. It was so. It had pushed her down so hard. And she said that she turned to look and she didn't see anything. And she looked around the room, but she could hear movement going around the room, but she couldn't see it. There was nothing. Now, when they came back from the boat, and being on the lake, they decided to cook dinner. They had fished a little bit. And they were gone until the evening, and she was terrified. She said that, she all day she was there. She went out on the porch, and she kept hearing this whistling noise coming from the woods. And she would go inside, and she would hear something moving around the cabin. And so then, when the party came back to Patrick and his people came back from the boating, they had fished, and he said, we decided to cook. He's like, so then I'm like, hey man, let's grill these fish up, whatever. And so he goes, since we were kids, our dads were. They all knew each other, and they took us out hunting, fishing. We knew how to do everything. So we just said, let's clean the fish and let's cook. And so he goes, and I went in and I got some stuff, and I was out there grilling. He goes, and my girlfriend's, or my cousin's girlfriend was out there talking to me, and she's like, I thought I saw something by the tree line earlier. And Patrick, when she said that, he's like, he had no memory of this prior to that. But when she said that, it sparked a memory in him that he remembered a few years before when he was out there by himself. He's like, that was one of the trips where I had a really good time. And I remember having good dreams and everything. And it was like I was in paradise. I love this place. And he goes, but the last several times have been really bad. Something weird always happening. But he said on one of those trips after he had purchased the cabin, he said that he saw something that looked like the Predator. Now we've talked about this, that glimmer man or shimmering phantom, whatever. And he said that it was there, and he goes, and I saw something step out of the tree line, and you could see it was kind of like it was pixelated. How that looks like a computer,
Like a little bit like a silhouette.
Yeah, like a silhouette. And it was a silhouette of something, but he could see that, but it was pixels. It didn't look normal. It was just like there was something there. He knew it was there, but it was like a camouflaged being. And he said that he saw it, and he goes, when she said that, he goes, I was sitting there grilling this fish. He goes, and I told her, I said, what? What was that? And she said, yeah, I thought I saw something by the tree line. And he goes, I did too, but I just now remembered it. And so then I stopped him and I said, look, there is a thing where people get, someone can make a suggestion and then it's implanted into your mind, and then you think that happened. He goes, no. He started immediately, kind of jumped on me. He said, no, I'm going to stop you right there, dude. He goes, I take issue with that. I'm not whatever. And I said, well, I'm not trying to offend you. And he's like, no, I'm not taking offense. I just don't. That's not what happened. He goes, that is not what this was. He goes, it was a memory I had. He goes, and then I started wondering what else could have happened. He's like, because on that particular trip, he goes, I had this really long 4-inch gash going down my shin. I don't know how I got it. He goes, but it got so bad when I got back into Salt Lake that I ended up having to go and get it treated. Because he goes, I was at work and one of the people in my office said, hey, your leg is bleeding through your pants. And he's like, looked down and he's like, oh man, messed up my doctors. I had to go to the doctor, and get it cheated, and it was getting infected. And the doctor told him something odd. He said that this looks like an animal claw. Like, how cats or dogs will scratch you with their claws and they're dirty. He says, and you could even see there's these two lines on either side of it were just nowhere near as deep. Like, so something 3-clawed kind of scratched me. And he goes, and I don't know why I never really noticed the other 2 spots on my leg. I just saw that one long line. And the doctor asked him, like, how did this happen? And he goes, I don't know. I was at the cabin. And he's like, were you playing with a cat or a dog? And he said, no, I wasn't. And so he says, dude, it was weird stuff was happening. So he said that on one particular trip he took out there, he went out there by himself, and his girlfriend, she had to work, and he says, I'm going to go out to the cabin for a couple of days by myself. He's like, and I'll be honest, he's like, me and my fiance at the time, they were already married, so it wouldn't be fiance, it would be his wife. He said, me and my wife are having some issues. We were trying to conceive, and she had a friend that was basically like trying to put it in her head that it was him. It was his fault, right? And he goes, so I go to the doctor and they check me and I'm perfectly fine. I'm fertile. Turns out it was her. But it wasn't that she couldn't conceive. She just had some issues. And so they had a big fight about it. And he took offense that she was, listening to her friend accusing him. And he was like, well, why is it always me? Blah, blah, blah. And I said, look, I'm not going to get into male, female, like who's at fault.
It's too hard to navigate all that.
Yeah, and he was telling me all that. And I'm like, I'm not getting into that.
He was like, I need some space. I'm going to go to the cabin.
Yeah, basically, yeah. So he went there for a couple of days. And he said the first night, he don't remember anything happening. He just kind of slept and relaxed. And the second night, he got on the phone with his wife and they started talking. And she's like, look, do you want me to come up tomorrow? Which would have been Saturday. He goes, do you want me to come up? And he says, sure. So he said, so he hung up, and that night he decided to go out on the porch. And he said most of the time it was pretty tranquil out there. But he said when he was out on the porch on this particular trip, and it was early fall, it was real nice. And I kind of know that area where he's at. I've been up there, and it is very nice that time of year. I've traveled all over that area. And he said that he heard a whistling noise, like a just like that. Right. And then he said that he stopped and he got up and he looked into the area, and then he heard it like almost immediately, like, 30, 40 yards on the other side. And he goes, how the hell did it move that fast to that other side? And he heard that again, and it was like a person mimicking a bird. So he went back inside and he was freaked out at that point, and he just decided to drink some tea. And he's like, I was watching some Sports Center and I just crashed out, man. He goes, I couldn't stay awake. I was really tired. He goes, the internet wasn't real good there. We had satellite and it worked. He goes, but you couldn't really get internet very good or whatever. So he goes, I was watching TV. I went in there, I passed out. And he had a dream. He had this dream that this older native looking guy that he had never seen this guy before, was shaking him, trying to wake him up and saying, dude, you need to get up. You need to get up. And I said, and I made a joke. I said, it told you, dude? And he said, yes, it did. It was like, dude, get up, wake up. And he goes, and it had the voice of like my brother. Like it was talking like my brother, but it was an older native guy. And he's like, and it shakes me and I wake up and I'm like, oh, what's up? He goes, I had never seen this person before. He goes, and then as it backed up, it became like a shadow and then it was gone. And I was like, whoa, what the heck? He goes, and then when I get up, I wake up. He's like, I go to the door is open. It's wide open. And he's like, and when I walk up to the door, he goes, I see this, I don't know what it is. He goes, it looks like a ball, like a black ball, kind of like rolling toward the door. And it's starting to take shape and grow like upward, like a man coming out of it. And he's like, and I'm looking at this and I'm like, what in the hell am I looking at? So I slammed the door closed. He goes, the next thing you know, I feel this force hit the door.
Was it like the bedroom or like?
No, it was the front door to the cabin. And he said that he was completely alone and he was isolated out there. And he goes, and this phone signal was like hit or miss, And in the middle of the woods, and he hears that whistling noise coming really loud. And he's like, and it's coming from all directions. He can't pinpoint where it's coming from. And then Patrick told me, he's like, I decided to lock the door. He goes, and for some reason, he goes, I just felt the need to do this. And I felt like these hands on my shoulder pushed me down. So I got down on my knees and I began to pray right there at the door. He goes, this is the weirdest thing. He goes, I know this is weird. This is really weird. And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of weird, but yeah, I've heard stuff, that's weird. And I said, did you pray, and earn? He said, oh yeah, I prayed hard. Like I was just like, help me God in the name of Jesus. He goes, I was praying. He's a devout Christian like me. And he said, I prayed. And he goes, and this thing was at the door and I could hear this hissing noise. I could hear a grunting noise and it sounded like something growling. And it was scratching at the door, and he goes, and it was scratching. He's like, and then eventually he goes, next thing you know, I look and it's daylight. He goes, and I know that my girlfriend was going to be coming up, sometime later in the morning. And he's like, and I was exhausted. And he goes, so I go back to the couch and I just feel like I'm okay. So I said another prayer, and I don't know how long I was there, but I laid down and I went to sleep. He goes, the next thing you know, I hear, and he gets up and he goes out to the door and he opens it. And there was this police officer standing there at the door. And he was like saying, he's like, do you know so-and-so, whatever, some person, he doesn't know who this person's name is. It was some guy. And he's like, no. And he goes, okay, well, we found his ID and he went missing. Last night he was, and so they found his ID, but they don't know whatever. And it was about 2 or 3 miles up the road. And there were these cops there and they were like, we're just looking for him. He's been missing. And we think something might've happened to him because they found blood or whatever. And then he starts to talk to them and question them, whatever. And asked them if there was any information they could give him, more about the guy or whatever. Like what happened to him, whatever. And they said, at this point, we don't know. He's like, do you think he died? Do you think it's foul play? Because I was really concerned because I'm thinking, man, when my wife gets here, I should probably leave if there's something going on. And they said, no, we don't know. We're just going place to place to try to, figure out what, So it turns out that story, he didn't know what happened until like a week later. They did find the guy, and the guy had gone, they found him trying to check into a hotel. He basically had like amnesia. And then like a few days after that, he ended up like this guy that this happened to.
Like the native dude?
No, he was just a regular white guy, whatever. But it turns out that dude said that he was attacked by something he couldn't see in the woods in the national forest there, right? And then he wakes up and he's like on the edge of town, on the edge of this small town. Starts with a P, I forget the name of it. And then he walks to this hotel or motel and asks to use the phone. Now, this is like in 2000 or something like that, or 2001. And so then this guy, this weird thing happens to him while he's out there, and he thinks, man, this is weird. And so he was telling his wife when they went back into town, that the next night he told his wife all the weird stuff that happened, and she's like, well, do you want to go home? They ended up staying the night. Nothing happened, but they did have weird dreams. So then they just decided to stay clear of the place for a while. And then they debated with her dad about what they should do. And they decided, you know what, let's just sell it. Let's just sell the place. It's too much trouble, whatever. Well, his girlfriend being native, right? Her dad said, look, okay, I really think that there could be something going on here. He's like, your mother died. He's like, I did some research. I did a little looking into it. And the guy that is your grandfather was the prime suspect, but he was never charged. They could never prove anything. She drowned, right? It was very weird the way she drowned. And so he said that it was a very weird thing, that happened. So then, I think she died in like Oregon or something like that. And so his dad, that's where his dad was from originally. And so he said that, they had gone up to Oregon, or not for where his dad's from, where his grandmother was from. So he said that's where she was from, but she was up there with her mother to get away from her dad because he was, crazy and had tried to kill his dad. Now, here's the interesting thing. When I asked Patrick this, I said, he tried to kill your dad. He said, yeah, but not in the way you think. He's like, he threw a curse on him. He's like, and my dad ended up breaking his back at work. And then it was kind of like a miracle because he was paralyzed, but then he ended up like walking within 2 years. Doctor said he could never walk again. He was swimming and running within 2 years.
Oh, wow.
So it was like a miracle. Yeah, it was amazing. And they don't know how it happened, but they think that he says, I think, and my family thinks, and my grandmother thinks that my grandfather did this. He's a very selfish, narcissistic person. And, you know, so he goes up there and visits with his ex-wife. And he's like, at that point, my mom and my dad were up there in Oregon to try to get in Eastern Oregon, try to get away from this guy. And next thing you know, she dies. She drowns. And he's like, it doesn't make sense. She was a strong swimmer. And so there was this whole weird thing or whatever that happened. Of course, he was a kid when this happened, whatever. And he said, you know, me and my brother, we were left without a mom. He's like, so I always despised my grandfather. And he goes, and I don't know who the native guy was that was there that woke me up. But when I talked to my grandmother, he said, that was my dad. She's like, you just described, you know, my dad.
So that was his great-grandfather?
That would have been his great-grandfather that woke him up. And she's like, and she goes, I can tell you this. She goes, your grandfather, that would have been his mother's dad, the one that was the suspect, was a very powerful medicine man, and he went down the dark path. And he had actually joined forces, which is almost unheard of because the Navajo and the Utes do not get along. But he had joined forces with another guy who was Navajo. And he gave him like instruction and kind of took him under his wing. This is what she said, to do black magic and use it against other Utes to take power over them. And so she said, this is not unheard of, you know, like these people that want power, they'll go into it to another tribe and join forces so that they can take
the only thing they set their differences aside for is evil.
Evil, yeah. And they go after people. And so she said that this guy that trained him, he eventually ended up dying very horribly because he was like, she said something like he was walking along the side of the road, get this, outside of a casino, and some like big truck hit him. And the trucker, according to her, get this, said that he thought it was a giant coyote that he had hit, but it turned to be a man.
Oh,
wow. That's why they think that it was a skinwalker. And the guy that hit him was some Hispanic dude. He was no native or nothing like that. And he was just like, I saw a giant coyote like on the side of the road, and it darted out in front of my truck, and it looked like it jumped, and I hit it. And so it makes you wonder. Now here, get this though. So then I said, okay, well then, and I was following along with what he was saying, but then I was like, okay, case closed. So your grandfather did some sort of astral projection while he was in prison. He's in prison. He's in a federal prison, right, behind bars. But he did it through some sort of astral projection, tried to attack you. Your great-grandfather saved you. End of the story. That's what. And he says, yeah, that the problem with that, though, was that this, whatever it was, had attacked somebody in that forest, right? And, you know, what was that? He goes, and then not only that, but he goes, what was that thing that we saw when we were kids? You know, it was very much a flesh and blood thing that he thought he saw. And his grandfather at that time was living in like Arizona or something like that. And was probably not doing that. So what the hell was that? And then the thing that laid on top of his cut, whatever. Now, here it gets even more convoluted because in the mid-2000s, this guy dies. I don't remember what year he said it was. He dies in prison. The haunting or whatever it is at this cabin continues until I think he said in 2008 or 9, he sold it. And he said that the people that bought it, he disclosed fully to these people. He said it was an Asian couple, an East Asian couple. And he said he told them, I think they were like Taiwanese. He said, look, this place has got some issues. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to tell you the truth. I'd feel bad if I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you that I think it's haunted. There's something here. And it's been here. He's like, we haven't had any issues in the last year or two. He goes, but we haven't been up here much. At this point, he had a son now that was like 4 years old. They did finally conceive. And I spoke briefly with his wife. When I called one time, she answered the phone. And she seemed like a very nice person. I don't know her. But I've known Patrick for a long time. And you probably know who I'm talking about. I've said it to you who he is. But so anyway, it's a weird story. And you would think that, hey, okay, we figured it out. But then there was something else going on, because after this guy died, there was still more stuff that happened. The last thing I'm going to tell you, and this is a weird story too, was when his wife and his son were outside and they were hiking or like going for a little walk, and they would not go very far afield away from him without him there. And that was her choice, his choice. They were just like very careful because of the weird stuff that had taken place and them being on the edge of that national forest. Okay, so they were out hiking and they hear that noise, which they hadn't heard in a while. And they look and they see a deer looking at them, a buck. And the little boy says, "Look, Mommy, a wolf." And she's like, "What?" And she's looking and it's a deer, like a stag. And so then she goes, "Okay." So then she just takes him by the hand and he goes, "Mommy, the wolf wants to be my friend," and starts talking about this wolf. Yeah, but it was like, that wasn't a wolf. She goes, "I saw a deer." He's like, and then when we were driving home on that trip, he goes, we all look to the right of the road and we see a deer literally standing on its hind legs, pulling a tree branch down to get, I guess, eating leaves or something.
Yeah.
And he said it was weird. He was like, "What is that?" And because it looked unnatural, he goes, and instead of it, like its front limbs coming down and it balancing itself, it just kind of hung there and then turned its head and looked at them and then turned and faced them. And then it came down. And everybody was like, "Ooh, that's weird." And so then his little boy says, "Oh, look, it's the wolf." Once again. So what the hell is that? And now his grandfather, the supposed possible, I'll just say it, possible Skinwalker, he's deceased. So what the hell was that? And the little boy is seeing a wolf. Now, his son obviously is a lot older now, and he's not a little child anymore, So then you fast forward, to, nowadays, whatever. You got to wonder. I mean, he's like I think he's like 22 or something like that. So his son, I heard him in the background. We were talking, and he says he saw that wolf a few different times when they were there. And they would be walking around. Once they thought they saw a giant porcupine, like him and his cousin, but he still saw a wolf. He never saw these other animals that these people were seeing. It was just a wolf. So I don't know. I mean, that's a weird thing. So what are your thoughts? I mean,
I've always heard about like children being able to see things that you might not be able to see. And honestly, it scares me a little bit.
Are you around children and they're telling you this? Or
no, but like I've had like children like in my family basically like tell me that like, oh, they've seen things.
Yeah, like their imaginary friend. How much of him is imaginary?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always been curious because, like, you hear it a lot with witches, where they will have things like a familiar or, something that they would have do their bidding. And I'm sure for medicine man, like, they probably have something similar because, like you said, like, it's too difficult for them to cross state lines at times or do things, but they still manage to do it. So there's obviously some sort of like something that's traveling that distance or making that journey for them because they're still able to affect, who they want to affect. So, I mean, but, that spiritual world and dark or magic in general, it's like a science that we don't understand. So it's difficult to even really understand if distance matters to it at all. But what it sounds like to me, that wolf creature thing might be like some sort of familiar of his that while, he was alive, he probably sent it to do stuff or, harass people. But after he died, like, it's not going to just be suddenly sent back to wherever it came from. Like, it's here now. And like, unless you have, it's like, the old, when he was alive, he had a leash on it, but now that he's dead, like the leash is free, so it can just go do
You think
whatever
the
it
whole
wants.
time all this that was going on, it was his grandfather using like an avatar or something?
I don't know if like it's directly an avatar. It might just be like, a hitman or just something where like he has control over it, where he summons it and like, he's able to go, you know how they say like, and like you're literally getting an entity attached to you, and like that's how like they people will transform into werewolves, or like they say like the vampires will have that entity attached to them, and that's the draining. It might be similar to that, where what we see as them adopting skins might be them actually like adopting an entity. Like it's weird that they put it all over their backs and like they cover themselves with it, and then you hear about these vampires who are like covered by this entity. So it might be something similar to that, where like it's not like,
because like on Saturday, remember that guy Chato? He was talking about the vampires, and it wasn't him that saw the. No, it was the other guy. What was the other guy's name? That he on the call-in show we did Saturday.
Yeah, it was him who saw the vampires.
He saw the vampires, but there was another guy that saw the 3 different times. He saw something that looked like Voldemort or whatever, with a weird snake-like nose.
That was the guy at the end, wasn't it?
No, that was the Chato guy.
Yeah, I forget what his name was at the tail end of that call-in show.
And I posed the theory because people have told us before that they could see people that don't look natural. They don't look like real people.
Yeah, I mean, and we talked about it a little bit with Francis on Sunday, but I on Saturday I kind of had the theory that, young, like similar to what Kiam said about how children are able to sometimes see spirits, but it's not like it's all children. So it's not like, it's something where just because you're a child, you're closer to the veil. I think it's similar to what she said Sunday and what I was trying to figure out Saturday, that it might be that, the more danger or turmoil like someone's in, the closer to the veil it is. And it's not that, it brings you to that state, but it's that you are preparing yourself for so much that like you're so in this hyper state of caution that you kind of are able to see everything. One of the saddest parts about humanity, and I think it's a fact that, it's one of our greatest abilities, but also saddest facts, is that we grow through conflict, and that like a lot of our advancements are because of some of the hardest times periods. So I think it might be similar to this, where this sense of conflict or danger or turmoil might force us to like semi-evolve ourselves, or like force us to even like regress back to how we probably were at a time. I mean, I think things have gotten safer, so I think we've lost a lot of things, but I think it's still there. It doesn't disappear.
Mm-hmm. Why would it be only attaching itself to that kid, though? Or like specifically that kid? Like I'm sure I'm just curious what the reason for what.
Well, I think
why it would pick one individual.
I think it had to do with if like my theory about like everything I said about it being like his familiar is true, it would make sense that he would be attached to that bloodline, because it's just familiar. I mean, it would also make sense because you have like weird incidents where people move into new areas, never had anything happen to them, but they move into this new place and all of a sudden the activity,
all hell breaks loose.
Yeah, and it might just be that like, it didn't recognize you anywhere else, but like once you were in its area, it recognized your bloodline, and you might have an ancestor who dabbled in the wrong thing and got attached to the wrong thing.
Well, that's like the whole giant theory, like that the Nephilim, they can smell your blood.
Yeah.
If you're like, how that the fee fi fo fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Like they can smell you, like there's something there, like the dog man. When people encounter them in the woods, sometimes they'll lift their head up like they're sniffing the air.
Well, it's funny
because they smell people.
We have ferrets and like birds and guinea pigs, but you can't have them interact at all because the very smell that birds and guinea pigs give off activate the predator sense in ferrets. So like they can't help it. Like even if you want them to be friendly, and even though ferrets are so friendly, once they smell those other animals near them, like they instantly want to go and like attack it. And like they can't. It's not something they control, and it might be something similar here, where like they just might be able to sense their prey in a way. And unfortunately, it seems like we're the prey.
I think the phenomenon on this property probably predates the old man, because if it didn't, like,
I think there could have been both.
Mm-hmm. It's possible.
If it didn't stop after he died, then maybe he wasn't necessarily the source of it, but rather a conduit, and maybe he chose to own that land specifically because of its like spiritual properties. Because I mean, these people who are very powerful in these like
he didn't own it.
Huh?
He didn't own it.
Well, he was there, right?
No. They went away. They left to like avoid him.
No, man, no. It was his dad's friend.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And his dad's friend wasn't even native. He was just,
Well, I was thinking that it was his.
Well, you're dumb as hell.
That was the place he chose.
Man, you dumb as hell. What you talking about?
Stupid.
You stupid, though.
No, I mean, I think I was going to say that does make sense. I was wondering if that activity was already there and he just harnessed it. And like, I wonder if people.
Well, I think that, like multiple
it's
things
like they
happen.
know,
There's
like, where
layers.
these places are.
Yeah. Yeah, of course.
Or,
I mean,
as a familiar, you're basically just making a contract with the spirit to force it or to like make it do whatever you want, or capturing it or doing whatever. So it might just be something similar where there's certain areas or lands that like you just know are spirit heavy. Mm-hmm. And like if you go over there, you can make a contract with one, or you can get attacked by one.
To me, it's like one of those things where we already know the whole thing about the national parks. I mean, we do. We know the state parks. We haven't told the story about McKinney Falls. We need to. That's another one we need to talk about. And we're definitely probably next Sunday, folks. Tune in this coming Sunday anyway. And we're probably going to tell that story about McKinney Falls. We got the ones from Hempstead, and then the one that was under the overpass where we drive by sometimes.
Yeah. Over
there off of St. Williams Loop. These are weird places that people see stuff more than once. McKinney Falls definitely is a place that people have seen more. Pedernales, you had Juan Arturo Mata that came on and talked about what happened to him. And then we had the other story. And then, of course, you had Jenna Perry. She came on and talked about the Bear Man. In the same area, you had Guadalupe's story. I mean, these people, like there's multiple people that will see the same thing in an area. But is it the same thing, or is it just something that looks similar? Because maybe there's more than one of these things. There could be clusters of them. And remember we were talking about on Echoes of Hernandez Ranch? You remember how Shane's brother, how he saw that dogman, whatever thing, but his friend went hunting out there on his property and he saw that bear-like thing? That was a different entity, man. I mean, that thing was like 9-10 feet tall. It was not one of these werewolf-looking things. It was like a werebear type thing. It was gigantic. It didn't look like the others, but it was on the same land. I think it was a different entity. I really do. I mean, people say, oh, well, they could shapeshift into whatever they want. Yeah, maybe not, but they always seem to have a preferred form.
And it seems like
I think that thing was different than the Dogman.
I think like shapeshifters, I think it's not like something where like they have to have a preferred form, but it's more like
preference.
No, I think it's like a safety reason. It's like, can you imagine having to switch bodies, like millions of bodies all the time, having that ability? You'd lose your sense of self so easily. I think
you don't even know who you are.
I think like they force themselves to have like
that's something that Gerald was talking about how his ability, it was based on his other. And he did not have the ability to turn into multiple things. But some of these reptilian hybrid beings that can pass for human, they could actually take the form of like a lizard, but they could shapeshift much more easily. They could turn into other things. The problem, though, is that it takes a lot of energy, according to him, to keep that illusion up. And for them, it was more illusory, whereas for him, it was actually a physical thing. So there's like two different kinds of – that's another thing we should probably talk about. I mean, when you look at the arcane, which is just magic, You gotta be careful over that, because the arcane is like, that's, you're talking about magic, I mean, when it's, we don't know. There's different layers and different levels, and we really don't know. So it's like going deep sea fishing. When you throw into the water, you don't know what you're going to get,
Yeah, and the issue too is like I wonder if like his little boy, how he kept saying, like, even with the giant porcupine, he kept seeing the wolf.
Yeah, they were all in shock as they saw this gigantic porcupine and with his cousins, but he saw like
the wolf.
Wolf.
I wonder if it's like a, and this is just me playing off of all of my previous theories. But I wonder if it's like a genetic memory where like he can't see, like it can't fool him because he knows what it truly looks like.
That's interesting.
So like that's why, even though it's pretending, like it might be doing what you're talking about with the reptilians, where like they illusory make themselves.
I agree
look
with
like
that,
something.
Except for with Kiam's little cousins, when they tell you that there's a demon there, it's there and it's after you. Just so you know, I'm positive.
Specifically,
of that,
just your cousins.
They don't like you. They're after you. I know.
We talked to the other demons. They told us that you're coming.
Yeah, we don't really talk to them. Really, they just scream and they said, "Kiam, he's the target. We're using children to come after him." Anyway, that's all interesting. It's very interesting theories.
A lot of theories. I mean,
yeah. But a freaky story. He had another one, but it was an angelic story. Maybe we'll get into that one day.
Did the family that moved there afterwards say anything has happened?
I didn't. He hasn't gotten in touch with them in any way.
I'm sure they would have contacted him if there was issues, though, like major issues.
Unless
It turns out that they've had all kinds of stuff. He's just ignoring. He looks at the phone. Oh, I'm not answering that call.
Unless they've already been like, hey, and they've already warned him. So like they're like, oh, it's like
he told them.
Yeah, he told them before they bought the house, which is a smart. I wish people did that more.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, you got to. I mean, there's some weird stuff. I mean, I was reading something the other day. There was an actor. Oh God, where was it at? Was it in Paranormal Roundtable group on Facebook? I can't remember. There was an actor that sold a house, and he was very upfront about it. And he admitted, he told them, "Hey, it was Dan Aykroyd."
Oh,
Dan Aykroyd, I guess, sold a piece of property to some other actress or something, and he told her, "Hey, it's haunted." I mean, he disclosed that, and that's interesting that he is a big believer in the paranormal. Dan Aykroyd.
Well, I mean, I think
of course,
some of these people don't get a choice. It's like,
yeah. But anyway, folks, thank you for tuning in to Paranormal Roundtable. Remember, we're going to be on the air all week, so we'll be Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and sometime in the fall we will be on television. So just stick around. A lot of weird stuff. And thank you for everybody that tunes in. Friday, like we do this, me and Abe Cius, Monica Rollins, Joe Breezy, and we talk about just about everything. And it's really just a fun hangout show. And if you want to ask questions, just put them in caps and we'll talk. Saturday is the call-in show, which has been a big hit. We've moved on from the UAP, and it was fun while it lasted. With my co-host Chris James, who has Strange Things with Chris James. Go check him out. He's got a podcast. He's a really good co-host. I had fun with him, but we decided to move on to a call-in show, which just kind of happened. It just kind of happened. And then we have Sunday, which is us retelling people's encounters, except for this past Sunday, we had someone come on and she told her encounters.
Saturday would be call-in show. Sunday would be like regular show if like leftovers from call-ins. I guess that's how we should expect it from the
expect a lot of interviews coming up too, because we are behind. We got to do a bunch of people want to talk about their stuff, and
a lot of stuff coming up on PRT though. So just stay tuned, guys.
Yep, and we're going to be doing some records with people, and so we may open up the Wednesday. Probably will be when we drop it. Wednesday, Thursday, we'll be dropping episodes. Opposite of Tuesday. So we'll have Tuesday. It'll still be the hour-long retelling of people's encounters. So, anyways, folks, thank you for tuning in, and good night.